My name is Rabbi Meyer Miller, and I now reside at 168 Tullamore Road in Garden City, New York, zip code 11530. As I mentioned to you during our telephone conversation, it is unfortunate that the papers that I collected and all the documents that I had during my chaplaincy overseas, I kept in a locker, in a footlocker, and when I went overseas to serve in South Africa, I left the footlocker with my brother, who put it in his attic for safekeeping, and unfortunately there was a fire which destroyed the building and the footlocker and all the documents that it contained. I therefore have to rely solely on my memory to answer your questions. After serving as a chaplain with the American forces in Great Britain for a little over a year, I was sent to Omaha and Utah beaches on D-Day plus 34. And the first encounter that I had with Jewish and survivors of the Holocaust was in the city of Bayeux, B-A-Y-E-U-X, in northern France, just near the Omaha beach. It was a family of a father, mother, and little son about the age of 6. He told me the story of his survival by hiding his Jewish identity. He was called a number of times by the Gestapo, but always convinced them, or was able to convince them, that he was a Frenchman and not a Jew. The same with his wife. Fortunately, his neighbors, who knew him to be Jewish, never gave him away. I helped him as much as I could with food, with a blanket and some clothing, and he then took me after a few days to see a gentleman, a Jew who had been in hiding and was most of the period away in the area where most of the Jews hid, in and around Grenoble in southern France. Then I met a lady in Caen, C-A-E-N, in northern France, not far from Omaha Beach, and she also told me of her experiences, and I was not the only one who assisted her. She became known to many of the Jewish soldiers, and I must give credit here to the Jewish men in the American forces who wanted to help Jewish survivors as much as the chaplains. They brought her food and helped her as much as they could. I can say in answer to your question, that as I moved forward with my headquarters until I arrived in Fontainebleau, where the headquarters was established, I did not meet any victims of the concentration camps. Most of the Jewish men, women, and children whom I met were victims of the Holocaust, but mainly hidden away and not in concentration camps. It is only later when my area of activity, although my headquarters was in Fontainebleau, my area of activity took me into many other areas with many other units, and as I moved forward into Germany, serving American soldiers in areas from Cherbourg all the way to Marburg in Germany, I then came across many Jews who were in concentration camps. My response to Jews was a very positive one, in the sense that I tried to do whatever I could for them. Whether they were in Cherbourg, and I met quite a number there, Le Havre, in the various French communities that I passed through and served wherever there were American soldiers. I was not attached to a unit that was in actual combat. I served the southern-based section at first, and then replacement sections, including hospitals, the various supply services. And I had to move around a great deal. But the largest number of Jews that I served, that I helped, with food, with clothing, with assistance, and were especially in Fontainebleau and in Paris, because I had to go through Paris very often. I did not serve in Paris itself. There was another chaplain there, especially Rabbi Judah Nadich, but I had to go pass through Paris on my way back and forth to Le Havre, to Cherbourg, or moving towards into Germany. And in Paris especially, I assisted and took it upon myself to help the rabbis. First, I helped Rabbi Weil, who was chief rabbi. I came to the synagogue and asked him what I could do for him. He had already been helped by other chaplains and by Jewish men in the forces, but I felt that I should like to do a little more and personally be of assistance to him, and would bring him food, he, his wife, and his daughter-in-law. And I came to his home. He had invited me, and I was there a number of times and helped him with food and with clothing. Then I assisted the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had just returned from hiding. He, his wife, his son, and his daughter had been hiding all through the period of the Nazi Holocaust in the Grenoble area and thus saved his life. And he really needed assistance, and I brought food to him. I got food I bought food from farmers as I traveled along. I'd buy eggs, I bought chickens, and I brought it to them. And then I also got a good deal of from the American camp in Fontainebleau, or the unit that I served at the time. I got food not only from my own headquarters in Fontainebleau, but whenever I visited a camp to serve the American forces there, I would see the officer there or the sergeant and tell him that I was going on. I asked for hospitality rations. Told him that on my travels I would stop off for hospitality to see Jewish people, and they were very generous, and they gave me a more generous hospitality ration, which I then brought to the Lubavitcher Rabbi Weil, and later on, Rabbi Kaplan, who then became chief rabbi of France, and his family with who had many children. He too was hidden away in the Grenoble area, and I became very friendly with Rabbi Kaplan. I visited him about twice a month, and always brought a large parcel of food. I learned that Hannah Orloff, the very famous sculptress, was in Paris, and I learned of her address and called on her as she was living there with her son and in great need. They had stolen all her works and her furniture, and the first thing she asked me was, could I get her a blanket, which I did within a very short time. The assistance that I gave her also was in food, and helped her especially try to help build up her morale. And one day we made arrangements on my next visit to call on Edmund Flegg and his wife, and we went there, and of course I brought them a large parcel of food, which they appreciated very much. I should add that when I speak about food, that very often the soldiers with whom I came in contact, who knew that I was distributing food to Jewish people, would give me their parcels that they received from home. It happened quite often that the soldier would say to me, he has received a parcel from home and he does not need that food that he received, and he handed it over to me to give to the Jewish people whom I met. Another service that I feel that I rendered the victims of the Holocaust was especially in Paris, in the area called the Pletzel. Whenever I came to Paris or passed through, and that is whenever I had an opportunity to go to the Pletzel to meet the Jews who had come out from hiding, I had learned that quite a number were hidden away for 4 years, never stepped out of their apartments or their homes for fear of being rounded up by the Gestapo. And there were quite a large number of these men and women, and they asked me, they recognized that I was a chaplain, and they asked me if I would notify parents or uncles or relatives in the United States. They had no means of communicating with them. They did not communicate with their relatives for more than 4 years, and they were anxious to let them know that they are alive. And I went into there was a little restaurant there, and we sat down, and I took the name and address of the parent or the relative in the United States and their names. And since I had the opportunity of communicating with the United States, I must have sent several hundred names to people in the United States indicating that their relatives were alive. Of course, they weren't too well. They had gone through this terrible Holocaust period, but I indicated, and I was anxious for them to know that at least they are alive. I regret it, and this has remained on my conscience for a long time, that I could not indicate to them, to relatives in the United States, to write to me and bring information back to their relatives. In many instances, they did not have permanent homes. They had been living in hiding in many instances. And in other instances, I was not certain that I could return to Paris. I was with the American Army, and any minute I could have been sent to another area. And I feel that, in retrospect, that I could have done that service for them, have written to their relatives, and then bring back actual regards or more information and bring them and in contact. But unfortunately, this was not done due to the circumstances under which I worked, and I did not have sufficient time. My area was too big, but still I feel now that I could have done that, even to a minor degree. Question number 2, with what Army unit were you involved during the period in which you helped the survivors of the Holocaust? I was involved with the 9th and the 11th replacement unit, and which was stationed in Fontainebleau in France, as I mentioned earlier. But prior to that, I was not with any particular unit. My first encounter in France was at Omaha and Utah beaches, where I was serving the American forces there, especially just before I was sent there just in time to organize the services for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and not attached to any particular unit. But then I came into Paris to the headquarters, where I was then assigned, but living or being stationed at the Omaha beach, I took ill, living in the damp dugouts there, and was hospitalized in Paris at the hospital there, the American hospital in Paris, for over a month with a lung affected lung, and so I was not returned to Omaha and Utah and then assigned to the headquarters of the replacement unit. Question number 3. What other experience do you have with the remnants of European Jewry after this initial encounter? Now, I seem to have included some answer to this question in the first question, and I want to continue by saying that my other experiences were with the few Jewish families who returned to Fontainebleau. I recall distinctly 4 families. The synagogue in Fontainebleau had been completely destroyed, and the old shamus and his wife returned from hiding, and he was living there, and I tried to assist him, assist them. Then there was a man and a wife and his little child who came back and returned to his furrier business, and another family of man, wife, and a child, so that since my headquarters was in Fontainebleau, I was with them, helped them, and invited them to services and all the holiday celebrations that we had in Fontainebleau, the Purim service, and party, the other festivals. Whenever we had a special occasion, they would join us. And then outside of Fontainebleau, I learned in a small village of a lady who had about 10 to 15 young children. Parents had left them with her, and the French never gave her away. And these children ranged from the age of about 2.5 or 3 to 13. And they were saved, taken care of by this lady, this French lady. The community itself helped her. They gave her special rations, and I remember her taking me to the cellar to show me the large amount of potatoes that they gave her. But the children were dirty and crying, and she did not take too good care of them. Now, I tried to help as much as I could for a short period, and then together with Rabbi or Chaplain Hazelcorn, who was in a unit not far from me, and after a conference in Paris with other chaplains and with the Jewish, and with the assistance of the JDC people in Paris, the house of, or the summer home, the large estate of the Rothschilds was taken over, and it became an orphanage where young children were gathered together and housed in this big estate. And these children that were outside of Fontainebleau were taken from this lady and transferred to this orphanage in the area. I don't remember exactly the name of the place. I also recall the fact that Rabbi Judah Nadich, who came to Paris earlier than I did, and had served several of the units which I took over from him, the Jewish men wanted to be of assistance, and they raised a large sum of money, several thousand francs from their pay, which they collected as a fund to give to a Jewish organization or to a Jewish school. And I had learned of a Jewish school in north of Paris, northern Paris, and I was able to hand over this sum in the name of the Jewish men. Since my wife is a graduate of Betzalel, she was formerly Shalamet Wittenberg, and is an artist, I felt that I would like to assist artists and tried as much as I could to get the names of individual artists living in Paris. And I was able to get the name of one or two Jewish artists who had returned to Paris, who had been hidden away, or they never left their homes and were saved in this way. And I got these names from the head of the JDC, the late Dr. Schwartz. And he gave me the names and addresses, and I went to see them, and I arranged for one evening whereby we got together. There were about 8 or 10 Jewish artists and their wives, and I supplied the liquor and the goodies and the food and so on, and we had an evening. It wasn't a too happy occasion, but we were able to sit and talk, and I was able to I tried to cheer them up as much as I could. There were other individuals with whom I came in contact in the various areas that I served, and as I traveled through. In Troyes, there was a Jewish family, and I remember in Paris meeting one of the leading, former leading Jews. I think his name was Yefrikin, and he was anxious to get material. He said for so many years he did not have any access to Jewish literature. And since I was receiving a good deal of literature from the Jewish Welfare Board, especially the old commentary, the publication that was prior to commentary, published by the Jewish Committee, I gave him all these copies that I had, and he was most grateful for them. I was not assigned to any area where there was a concentration camp, so that I was not functioning, and I did not serve in that area. But as I met Jews who had been in concentration camps in my travels around, or meeting them at various occasions, the assistance I rendered them was by trying to find survivors. One of the chaplains, I cannot recall his name at the moment, began issuing lists, and all the chaplains received these, and I would carry them with me, and whenever I encountered Jewish survivors, I would show them these lists of survivors, the places where they could be reached. In many instances, of course, the search was in vain, but there were instances that there was joy in learning that a relative or a dear friend had survived. For the high holy days of 1945, I was sent to Luxembourg. I was sent there in August in order to organize the services for Jewish men in the American forces, and I came to Luxembourg because it was a leave area, and I found there quite a number of survivors, Jews who had been in concentration camps or who had been hidden away, and their synagogue was destroyed, but we were able to get a hall and organize the services for the Jewish men, and in conjunction and together with the Jewish survivors. I must have found about at least 100, some families and some individuals. And my assistance to them was in providing services and cheering them and helping them with the religious life as much as I could. I was there for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur, and for Sukkot, until after Sukkot. They had requested aid from the JDC and had received some aid, but felt that they did not receive sufficient. And I investigated the situation as best I could, and I remember making a special trip to Paris to get additional assistance and monetary aid from the JDC for the Luxembourg Jewish community. I was able to get a sum of money. I don't remember the details, which I brought to the organized community. They had a chairman, and they tried to reestablish the community. I also helped several families. I went to the government, the Luxembourg municipality, with them. One man especially, who did not receive his apartment back in time, asked me to go with him, and I did go and was able to assist him. I'm very happy with that. There was one man who served as, he was in business, and he lost his business. It was taken away from him, and he took me past his shop. He says, this was my shop formerly. And then I went with him to the municipality, to the authorities, and they had promised that they would do everything possible to help him, that the business be returned to him. I can remember distinctly that the Lubavitcher Rebbe once asked me to see him on a special day about a week or two later. And I made a special trip to Paris, and I asked him what he wanted me for, and he asked if I would take him in the Jeep. I had a Jeep and a driver. I would take him to a special place. And I did not ask any details, and I said, all right. We went into the Jeep, and he took me to the Pletzel, to the place which was formerly a baker's place, Jewish baker. And it was a place where they used to bake the matzah. And there were some workmen, Parisians, non-Jews, who were fixing the machinery. It had all been destroyed. And he wanted them to hasten the alterations and the replacement and fixing and so on. And he felt that being there as an American officer, I could be of great assistance. I handed them some packages of cigarettes, which was a great luxury for them. and he received the most cordial attention, and they promised that they would do everything possible to help the rabbi in the getting the bakery ready for Passover. Question number 4, were you involved in getting packages from the United States and distributing them to the survivors? If so, please state how this developed. No, I did not get packages from the United States for distribution because I was on the move a good deal, but I received packages voluntarily from GI personnel. Very often they came to me and said that they had parcels that they had received, candy, a good deal of material which they felt that they would rather hand over to survivors. And this was done in Cherbourg, in Le Havre, in Fontainebleau, and in Paris, and then in other smaller towns in France. How were you able to provide food and other necessities to these survivors? I seem to have answered this question previously. I was able to get food by going to the catering officer in the various units that I served and spoke to them of hospitality rations, that I was invited to various homes, and since I was a chaplain, I was able to induce them to hand me more than the usual ration that was allowed by the Army and the American forces. I also was able to pick up food as I traveled through the country. I would stop off at farmhouses, especially in France. They were reluctant to sell things and claimed that they were short and they had been robbed and so on. But for sums of money which I gave them, or for cigarettes, I was able to get I would get a number of times I got chickens and a number of and other material, eggs and other things. I cannot mention this specifically, but I was able to pick up quite a bit in this way. I remember distinctly when I was in Luxembourg, as I mentioned earlier, that for the holidays I wanted to have for myself and for a few of the officers have a meal with the cantor. He was a businessman, formerly a businessman in the city of Luxembourg, whose home and business had been taken away from him. And he, his wife, and his little son, I felt instead of eating with the U.S. forces, with the Army, that we would eat in his home. And so I went around outside of Luxembourg and stopped at a farm. And it was an unusual experience in the sense that this farmer sold me quite a bit. He sold me a fowl. Of course, he overcharged me, but I was ready to get it at any price. And he also sold me some vegetables and other things, and told me that he was formerly a farmer in Utah. This material I brought to the cantor. He served as cantor during the services in Luxembourg, the army services that I held, and his wife prepared these meals, and there were two other U.S. officers and myself who had the meals, and then again for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, And then again for Sukkot, I brought him hospitality rations, canned goods and tea and sugar and things that he was very happy. They were very happy to have. I also was able to get special rations from the U.S. Army for the various services that I held during the holidays, for Pesach, for Purim, for Hanukkah, for the High Holy Days, when we had an oneg after the service. I remember especially for Hanukkah and Purim, and for the Sidorim on Passover in Fontainebleau and in Étampes, I invited the civilians to join us, and there were quite a number who participated. I remember an occasion where in Fontainebleau we had a party after the Purim service, and I had arranged to get flour, jam, sugar, tea, coffee, and other things, and I brought it to the wife of the shamus in Fontainebleau and asked her to make hamantaschen and other things for this party, and which she gladly did. Of course, I paid her for her services. And then during the party, we had invited the civilians, and there were some Polish soldiers, or soldiers of the Polish army, Jewish soldiers from the Polish army in the area. They too were invited. And there were quite a number of French soldiers or Polish Jews serving in the Polish or the British Army in the area. And they also were invited, and it was held at the Aigle Noir Hotel. And my assistant came to me in a terrible state. He said, these people were rushing around the tables and picking up these cakes and hamantaschen or whatever we had and stuffing it in their pockets. And he was very concerned that there wouldn't be anything for the American soldiers. Well, I told him not to worry. If they want it, let them have it. They haven't had this for so long. And then I spoke to one of the soldiers that I knew, one of the Polish Jews, and he told me that this was done not for themselves, but they put it in their pockets to take home for their wives and for their children. And I was very happy that they did so. Unfortunately, I could not do even more than I did. Whenever I had an opportunity, I would put in a request for special rations for the various festivals with the Quartermaster Corps. And of course I did not tell them that this was for civilians, but told them that were for American soldiers, that these were for the functions that we were to have after worship services. And I never had any trouble getting what I requested. And very often I was able to have a sergeant or a Jewish sergeant or a Jewish soldier in the kitchens, and they were able to get things and prepare it, and we would then invite as many of the civilians to join us, and in that way help them also. I hope that this is clear. This wasn't done every week. This was only done before Hanukkah, before Passover, before the various festivals, Purim, and so on. Number 6, what was the response of the Jewish and Gentile GIs when you needed their assistance in helping the survivors? To what extent was your Jewish personnel involved in helping the survivors prior to and during your own involvement? I found that many of the Jewish soldiers, I cannot speak of the non-Jews, there were quite a number who were buddies with Jews and so were responsive to the needs of the survivors. But I speak now only of the Jewish GIs who went out of their way to seek Jewish survivors and did everything possible to help them. Not only did they give me their parcels, and not only did they get the clothing and blankets and other material for them, but they gave them themselves. They went out of their way to search out, and very often I remember soldiers coming to me and telling me that they